Hello, and a warm welcome to our session, where we will share with you our approach and learnings on creating exciting digital student experiences. It's important I remind you to make any purchasing decisions based on the availability of software in the market today. And whilst we may share with you future direction of the product, we cannot make promises or commitments to those developments. Though our presentation today focuses on sharing with you our experiences of aid in the higher education sector. My name is Dan Owen, and I'm thrilled to join you today to share our experiences and approach to driving digital transformation. I'm privileged to represent our CTO office across Japan and Asia Pacific to both convey our strategy and product roadmap, but more importantly, to provide the voice of the customer back into product strategy. Today, we will also be joined by Adam Gill, who is a Senior Principal Customer Success Manager, who will demonstrate how MuleSoft has helped the Australian higher education sector to integrate and automate to achieve a connected university. Adam will also share insights into a recent MuleSoft customer who was able to improve data integration, facilitate process automation, and create enhanced educator and student experiences. We'll also be joined by Sean Cummins, Director of ICT Projects at the Department of Education in South Australia, who will walk us through his recent experience of using MuleSoft and how it has enabled the student and educator experiences. We are privileged in Australia to have a such broad and rich higher education sector, which is regarded as one of the top destinations globally, which benefits both domestic and international students. Whilst the last 18 months have been a challenge for international students, many of our universities have accelerated their digital transformation to continue in serving domestic students through this period and seek to provide an engagement channel that is resilient to border and travel restrictions. The impacts of COVID-19 on higher education are well understood. On an industry sector that is of critical importance to Australia in terms of GDP and net immigration. 25% of annual revenue into universities is generated from international students. And over the past 18 months, the absence of these students has had a significant impact to the bottom line. It's therefore imperative that universities accelerate their digital transformation to both manage the underlying cost basis as well as protect for future border issues and equally provide engagement channels that will forever be an expectation of all students. The positive impact of this is for Australian students is the access from intra and interstate travel to universities. Protecting against border closures is a year-over-year impact to student engagement. Of course, focus has been on the enrolment year for students to join new universities to begin their degrees. But returning students are of equal and maybe greater importance as they are invested into their degrees and looking for engagement to continue their studies. Inevitably, this has driven online and digital student engagement significantly across the sector and presents now a new set of challenges for universities to grapple with. It has fundamentally changed the business model of the sector and brought with it new challenges. It's easy to believe simply turning teaching from physical to digital is a matter of using new digital technologies. But doing the same process in a new way is not always optimum for either the recipient or the organization itself. And equally, the employees of each university are going through change and looking to approach their engagement differently. So it's fascinating and opens many opportunities, not only for students, but researchers too. The research and development for the COVID vaccines was a global effort within a number of pharmaceutical companies. And given the urgency and motivation to find a vaccine, researchers showed that working remotely and virtually is productive. I remember from my own research days doing my PhD, I worked for prolonged hours by myself and only had the opportunity to work with peers at conferences, scheduled biannual meetings, or through travel. It's actually now the de facto channel to work with others virtually, and this can only accelerate the research of outcomes across numerous areas of discovery, medicine, and understanding. In the near term, we are working with universities to now evolve their business models, processes, and technologies landscape to realize these opportunities. In response to new and emerging education models, rising accessibility and cost pressures, and recruitment disruption, we've seen universities invest in a common set of related digital initiatives to drive continued growth. Campus safety. As vaccines continue to roll out, how do you address an increasingly fragmented student population that actually has an increasing preference on hybrid learning models moving forward? And legacy IT. The rapid shift to virtual-only learning, overnight in some cases, was not easy, and it exposed long-standing challenges involved with decades-old on-premise infrastructure. As EdTech continues to evolve, how will colleges and universities support the data and processing required to deliver this new digital experience? Self-service, whether it's paying tuition, checking on course assignments, or receiving campus-wide information. Students increasingly expect to have one single, easy-to-use platform that can provide all of this information in an up-to-date timeframe. Enrollment. Education programs well suited for online learning, like Southern New Hampshire and University of Phoenix, have easy-to-book virtual classes. So why does it take 3 weeks to sign up to a class that you can see online? Manual processing tasks, managing classroom sizes, different departments using different scheduling systems, Excel spreadsheets not able to upload to online scheduling systems, all come together to cause painful student experiences at traditional in-person colleges that just impact the long-term virtual learning need. In Campus 360, students increasingly expect consistent, connected experiences across channels, from web to mobile to social, and of course in person. It's been shown that omni-channel options contribute to better experiences. At the same time, professors, admissions professionals, and other campus staff need student information in a consistent way to find information to do their jobs efficiently. Integration prevents IT from delivering on these initiatives at the speed the business requires. We found that an average transaction crosses 39 different technology systems. Addressing integration through point-to-point custom code makes each successive integration project as hard as the last, makes it difficult to adapt to new and evolving business requirements. Let me illustrate that. Within a single initiative, such as creating a self-service online portal for student classes, custom code integration slows project delivery. In this example, class schedules and student data from systems like SAP would need to be connected to each endpoint that a student engages with, from a mobile application to an in-person class or to a paper enrollment form. Over time, each endpoint that's added requires more integration work. As IT takes on new initiatives, such as modernizing learning management systems, more custom code will be required to service the same data to a new set of endpoints. As the number of technologies and initiatives required to support the university grows, so too does the amount of integration work required. MuleSoft provides an alternative to custom code point-to-point integration that allows universities to accelerate digital innovation by increasing the speed at which IT can deliver projects and providing IT with the agility to adapt to changing student needs over time. But it's not just technology. Innovating at speed and scale requires a new operating model that empowers IT and the business to work together to make this a reality. MuleSoft's unique and proven approach is built, informed, tested, and hardened by thousands of customer implementations globally, and the insights that we have gathered over the past decade. Using our approach, you can drive collaboration and innovation that spans integration and automation, making them competencies of your organization. Central IT can focus on producing reusable assets, securing them, managing them, maintaining them, and automating them. business teams can focus on consumption of those assets in a discoverable, self-service way to deliver their own projects. And therefore, we are moving from a react phase of adjusting to new demands through border and government controls to manage the COVID pandemic in Australia, to reform and reforming universities to excel in not the new, but the next normal. And further, with excitement, how to reinvigorate the sector to provide new learning opportunities to those from all backgrounds, locations, and abilities, so each individual can be the best they can be. I'd like to invite Adam now to share his experiences working closely with a number of universities in Australia in their journey from react to reform and on to reinvigorating themselves. Adam.
So thank you, Dan, for that introduction, and welcome everybody. My name is Adam Gill. I'm a customer success manager here at MuleSoft, and I look after the ANZ higher education sector. So how can an API-led approach change and address the challenges that we see across the sector at the moment? What's key to API-led connectivity is this concept of building blocks and composability. By taking monolith integrations, by breaking them down into sections that are relevant, to create those blocks and then to reuse those blocks. And as part of that, we create a productionized environment, which is easy to consume and reuse. We manage those blocks and those APIs around security to allow scalability and performance. And lastly, we make them discoverable. And through self-service, we get reuse and we get speed to market. So as we start to apply that concept into the Australian tertiary sector, we start thinking of what's key here. One is integrations. Two is reusability. And third is that organizational change around self-service. How can projects come into the environment? How can they reuse what is being created? How can they run faster, but still be governed in a secure and composable manner? And why do we do that? So research has shown us that through this approach, project delivery will be 64% faster. We will also see a far greater level of security. No more point-to-point integrations, no more file transfers. We're starting to build a set of integrations that are secured at the organization level. And lastly, we will see cost reduction, a dramatic cost reduction, up to 63%, research has shown us. That reduces the cost of development. And that is offset against the use of driving reuse through self-service. So there are organizational change impacts that we need to consider here to make this successful. So why MuleSoft? API-led connectivity is core to our belief. Taking a monolith integration, breaking it down into a system API, a process API, an experience API, allows us this clear layering structure which allows reuse. It also allows different parts of our organizations to own and leverage those APIs, whether it's central IT, whether it's line of business, or whether it's end state developers. And as we start to develop out this ecosystem, we start to move to this concept of citizen developers, where we could push development of APIs out to students or researchers. The system layer is key to us in terms of unlocking those old historic databases, whether it's Oracle, PeopleSoft, Tech1, etc. The process layer is where we start to think about what is the function that we want to apply? Is it for a student? Is it for a researcher? Is it for a staff member? What is the process that we're trying to do here? And lastly, experiences, how do we expose? How do we expose to a mobile app? How do we expose to our website? How do we improve that digital experience? We've seen globally how MuleSoft accelerates digital transformation in higher education. There's some great case studies across the world at the moment, especially on the back of COVID, in terms of reopening campuses such as Georgetown. INSEAD have done a load of work around enrollment and scheduling automation, reducing time for students to make it easier for them to enroll and to be part of the university. And there's a lot of work we're doing around campus modernization and self-service. So at the heart of this, MuleSoft can create and does create a connected student experience. Obviously, we partner very closely with our parent company, Salesforce, to achieve that. We deliver powerful digital learning experiences. We provide single portals for students to log into. And lastly, we can provide that holistic profile for every student. And what's key to this is the journey of the student. It's a journey of life that we're trying to create here. From when a student comes in, as they transition through their course structure, as they become alumni, and then they have further on-the-job training, we want that student to be part of your ecosystem for life. So what I'd like to do now is bring this story much more locally. I'd like to talk about 3 customer stories that have occurred here in Australia over the last couple of years, and deep dive into a couple of them and explain them to you, and talked about the challenges that the customers have had, but more importantly, the outcomes that they've achieved. Before I start though, I just wanted to talk about the sector. We at MuleSoft are very grateful for working across 16 education customers, not just universities, but also K to 12. We're also very fortunate to have 3 state government departments, 3 education departments as part of our customer base. And the last presentation will be Sean, who will talk to you about what he's trying to do in South Australia at the moment. But lastly, and a real sign of our trust and our sentiment and our success in this marketplace is that we have 21 million production transactions go through in the last 24 hours from our customers, just in higher education. It's a phenomenal amount of transactions. And all those transactions are going through on our Cloud Hub, which is our iPaaS solution, and they're secure and they're governed. And obviously, we have some great uptime there to be able to satisfy these customers. As part of this, we also need to understand, why are our customers using our platform? So core to that is obviously students, whether that's an acquisition process, whether that's retention as students transition from semester to semester and we want to retain them, or whether that's extension, taking a student from an undergraduate to a postgraduate or to alumni. Secondly is staff. We've seen massive changes across the sector in the last 18 months. But what we do know is that our staff have our IP. They're the ones who are going to be able to enact and enable change within our organization to make life better for us, for our customers. We need to consolidate around those staff. We need to nurture those staff. But more importantly, we need to empower them. We need to empower them when they have a good idea and they want to make that change. Thirdly is research. A lot of focus has been around research funding and publication, but also how do we do cost control as well for projects that overrun? How can MuleSoft help with that? And that's what our customers are talking to us about now. Lastly, on research, and what is becoming very interesting is having a lot more conversations around monetization. So we have data, we have research. How do I monetize that? How do I plug some of the gaps and the shortfalls we've had with the lack of international students over the last 18 months? And lastly is industry. Nothing new here, but obviously we need to continue to work closer with our industry partners. We need to invest in them, but they need to invest in us. We need to grow those relationships and we need to continue to develop them. So as mentioned, I've got 3 case studies I'd like to take you through. The first one is an Australian G8 university talking to their student, their journey around MuleSoft, then into a digital experience through RMIT, and lastly into some academic experience with Swinburne University. I've been very fortunate to work with a G8 university over my last 3 years at MuleSoft. That university was a MuleSoft customer since 2016, and they engaged us a couple of years ago to come in and have a look at their platform. What they recognized and what our research showed was that integration had responded to the needs of the business. It had grown organically. And as part of that, no deliberate architecture had been mandated. And so this organic growth had caused some challenges in terms of scale. What they also realized was that integration was key to the outcomes they were looking for. It was really important for them to start to consider consolidation around platform, but more importantly, around how deliberate architecture would improve the experience. They wanted us to focus on 5 different areas. As you can tell from the diagram, a lot of their integrations were actually point-to-point or file transfer, but they wanted us to think about how would they refactor what they had? How would we be able to satisfy their growth as more projects came online? How would they be able to scale through affiliates, both here in Australia and internationally? And also to help them around consolidation, around research and education. Their approach to date had been very traditional. As you can see, very flat, very point to point, satisfying the needs of the projects as they came in, whether that was pulling information from Callista, whether that was pulling information from Salesforce, the structure was very flat. And what they've realized is that that structure had also created some very significant points of failure. To address that, we applied an API-led approach. And that API-led approach allowed us to break down, just looking at those 11 integrations that were on the previous slide, to break down their integrations into APIs. So take those monolith integrations, break them down into APIs across system, process, and experience layers. And what we could demonstrate very clearly was that if they wanted to change anything within that structure, for example, in this slide, bringing forward, improving the student experience through a mobile app, it was a simple addition to the experience layer. This would allow them to scale quicker if they wanted to change. If they wanted to use a mobile app to demonstrate, to pass data on to students. We were also able to articulate the value in terms of reuse, reduce costs, and increase speed across the projects. As you can see here, the bottom layer is obviously just being reused. So when project 2, which is developed by project 1, but when project 2 comes along, there's a small incremental step change of additional work that project 2 has to do. And project 3, the incremental change is even smaller. This makes those projects quicker to deliver. It makes them cheaper to deliver. And all of that is wrapped around our infrastructure and the support that we can bring them in terms of helping them reduce on the platform the number of customer policies they have, increasing the number of reusable assets they have, obviously looking at simplification and future-proofing them for the future. So taking on board our ideas here, the university this year decided to engage directly with us to explore Moodle, their LMS. They had a specific use case, which was around student special consideration applications. And their goal here was to unlock the data that Moodle has. Obviously, this isn't the first time they've unlocked Moodle. They've had data come out of that system, but again, they found they had lots of challenges with that. They didn't understand the architecture of Moodle and the underlying databases. The integrations were built at a point of time based on a project requirement, and there were multiple project requirements. So there were multiple integrations there that were built. And lastly, they had real challenges from an operational perspective to manage these integrations when they failed. A lot of the IP had been lost. Obviously, each project had developed the integrations. The projects had closed and finished, and the IP had left the building. What they wanted to do then is to think about, well, how can we do this by using APIs? So the Education Innovation Group, which was central to this, tasked the technology teams to say, how can we do this? So what we did here is we applied an API-led approach onto Moodle. That grew faster. That allowed us to then release the data in Moodle, and it allowed us to use this API-led approach to enable future opportunities. It also allowed us to impart security in here as well, and scalability. But it was so successful, and the feedback has been so good that now we're taking that approach and we're applying it to their next program, which is Project Remix. So now, not just unlocking Moodle, but also unlocking HR and finance databases as well. Moving on to my second customer story, I'd like to talk to you about how RMIT transformed the student digital experience. Now, we need to cast our minds back 5 years ago, which is when this program started. RMIT had a specific problem. They knew that they had a decline in traditional on-campus enrollments. They knew that there was a change in demand happening across their for tertiary students who wanted to interact with the university, who wanted to study at the university. And they set themselves a goal, and that goal was to exceed the on-campus learning experience. As part of that, there were 3 areas that they wanted to focus on. So first of all was, how do I replicate what we as consumers see every day? When we go to Amazon, when we go to eBay, when we go to any online store, we were getting these great digital experiences. We were able to go in, we were able to purchase, we were able to order, we were able to have delivered products to us. But the education sector wasn't offering that service. So they wanted to replicate that online experience. Secondly, they wanted to differentiate their virtual learning. Historically, LMSs, while being exposed to the internet, had provided very static content. They wanted something much more interactive. They wanted a way of interacting with students so that students remained engaged, obviously very important to them from a retention perspective as students move from semester to semester, but they wanted that interaction to be available to students and obviously to staff to be able to work together. And lastly, they wanted to improve the end-to-end experience. The concept here changed from being a student doing a course to a student for life. So how do I understand, how do I define what a student is? How do I help that student select a course? But more importantly, how do I get that student to keep coming back and to continue to consume more and more, even if they're now in industry? To achieve that, what was clear, what they had to do was focus on some key challenges that they had. They had a cloud architecture. They had both off the shelf and bespoke applications. They had on-prem architecture as well. They wanted to look at administration simplification. It was key for them that the process that a student followed to be able to administer, to enroll, had to be much simpler. They really wanted to focus on retention and completion. The retention of the student, the ongoing revenue that comes from that student, the ongoing relationship that comes with that student was key to them. And as part of that, they knew they had to focus on that improved student experience. And lastly, as I mentioned, this concept of student for life, how do we get the alumni community built in here? Rather than having alumni as a separate part of the organization, it was trying to piece it all together around the student as that central record, that central person that they wanted to talk to. They achieved this through a composable cloud-based architecture, bringing together 25 platforms. This composable, flexible architecture supported bespoke applications, supported a student course builder application, and obviously heart of that was the personal learning profile. At the heart of all of this was MuleSoft. MuleSoft is the engine that helped them piece together all these different components to give them the successful outcome that they were looking for. That really strong middleware was the key to success in this instance. And what did this give them? At the end of the day, they recorded a 34% increase in enrollments. They also built out what they call a learner record. It's part of their strategy, part of their process, and it allows them to, again, create this student for life concept. All of this was built off a single platform with MuleSoft in the middle, plumbing everything together, providing the data to help that student on that journey. For my third customer story, I'd like to talk about students for the future. We continue to see the development of technology around us. We see the change and the demand for products and services continually changing. And at the heart of that is technology. Let me give you a simple example. In 2006, MuleSoft was started up with this view that integration was important. Over the last 15 years, we have developed into a global organization. And in doing so, we have created a skills gap. This new technology has created a demand profile. The demand profile needs to be satisfied by skills, by students coming forward with the ability to be able to develop on our platform. And we need to make sure that we're ready for that. And how do we do that? To me, it's working with universities and our industry partnerships to be able to drive education and technology knowledge at that layer. It's key that our educators need to address the skill gaps. The opportunity is, as I said, enormous. If you think about Australia alone, I think the demand is somewhere in the region of 156,000 employees are required to constantly satisfy the demand within technology. For MuleSoft, is a great example of where that demand falls short. You can see this massive scale of just one platform, one vendor, and look at how that scales up and how the gap continues to grow and widen. And more importantly, the students of today will become the Muleys of tomorrow. So how do we do that? We provide them with the opportunity to develop industry-ready skills. We address the current emerging skill gaps, and we empower these students to connect with industry leaders. And lastly, we make sure that our students are ready for the marketplace. I'd like to hand over to Sean, who will take you through a story around the Government of South Australia.
Thanks very much, Adam. I'm Sean Cummins, Director of ICT Projects from the Department for Education South Australia. Really pleased to be here at EduTech and discussing my story with a lot of the rest of you and talking about our journey on integration and how we transform through integration with our partnership with MuleSoft. So just probably to start and give you some context, the focus we've had started with our corporate vision, our department vision. And much like most transformation journeys, it really has started to anchor back against that language, really determining exactly what that means, and making sure that we can enable that through our digital strategy. So really, the focus on the vision has been to build a stronger future for our children by making South Australia's education system world class. And it really is that world class language that we really gravitated to, making sure that is throughout everything we do. And as our department has broken down that vision, there's a lot of key drivers that we're really focused on as to how we meet that. And we've, from a ICT projects perspective for the department, we've been building up and out to develop an education management system, which is really a connected ecosystem of applications and services that all of our children and students, all of our parents and teachers and school staff and corporate staff will all need in order to truly be world class. And we focused on a couple of key enablers in there, key drivers that have come out of that the strategy, focused on expert teaching, making sure that our teachers have access to the data and world-class technologies that they'll need in the classroom. Focused on quality leadership, making sure that we've got the ability to provide insights, surface up information for decision making, and make sure that that is real time and of high quality. We've also looked at engagement with our parents and communities, making sure that we can create a seamless experience and make sure we can bring those our parents and other members of the community into the learning journey and really get the best outcomes. And of course, we need to focus on the resourcing and investment side of things, making sure again that there's clear data, insights and decision making around how we're going to resource and make sure that we can free those resources up for our schools. And really what all of that translates into is into an education management system, and we are in the process of rolling that out at the moment, and we've rolled that out to over 190 of our preschools to date, and we're focusing now on expanding that out to our primary and secondary schools. But what does that really mean? An education management system, obviously a very nice label to put on something, but ultimately there are a lot of complexities in trying to bring all that together, and how those the different applications might work in there. And ultimately, inside of our department, much like a lot of the rest of you would have, there are a tremendous amount of different services and applications that come together to try to create an education experience and to facilitate and enable a lot of those drivers that I mentioned. And there are technologies that will reside at a corporate level, core systems that need to provide data and systems of record, and manage all the transactions that happen on a daily basis that come out of school management, student management, and classroom and other areas. And there's a lot of applications that also jostle about inside of schools and even in the classroom. And of course, there's going to be numerous technologies that then surface up and out into our parent experience and out to the community. And there's lots of applications that overlap, and lots of functionality that then, if we're not careful, can actually create a bit of quite a lot of friction inside of an experience. It can also make it quite hard for us to really make best use of the data when you're managing multiple data sets of the same thing ultimately. And so how we tried to bring all that together, and we have, to the point around world-class, we really have world-class platforms, we have world-class providers in this ecosystem. They're really fortunate to be able to work with some of these great names, and they are driving tremendous value by transforming the way we work and taking a lot of our legacy processes and turning them into digital ones. But having all of those just bit by bit, just sort of replacing an old technology with a new one or introducing a new technology for a clear gap is only just part of what we need. Ultimately, we needed those applications to come together in a way that made sense. And this is really where we've really had the benefit of partnership with MuleSoft, both at a platform and architecture perspective, but also on the advisory services to help us bring things together. And we've really made sure that the integration conversation becomes really at the forefront of everything we're doing when we talk about architecture and design. And a lot of what we're also trying to do is not just think in the context of what services and applications we need or we have access to inside of our school environments and our corporate environment. There is a tremendous amount of third-party services that we also need to integrate into. Ultimately, when we think about parents and members of our community as also being citizens, there's a lot of other agency information that starts to come through the way in which we will present all of that information in a meaningful way. So when we've got that, we've got, especially with the current climate, we've got health services, we've got wellbeing services and welfare services, we've got payments and banking services, and of course we've got identity services, trying to make sure that we can make it easy for members of the community to interact. And identity will mean different things from an internal user to an external one, and we really are trying to bring all that together. And really, how do we do that? We do that via a clear API strategy, but an API strategy very anchored against the MuleSoft three-tiered architecture. And if you look on the right-hand side of this, the slide that I'm showing here, it is really about making sure that we don't just think at application-specific level, that we're actually thinking more at taking the applications up into a connected system level, making sure that we can see how those systems, those applications need to talk in a cohesive system. And then we also look at the business processes and the process layer as to how we manage the logic and business rules and policy that needs to sit inside of all the services we're providing. And but most importantly of all, we start to anchor ourselves against an experience layer. How do we bring that experience to life? How do we make sure that that we're able to think experience first? And that is a real passion that we have at the department, and a personal passion of mine is making sure that experience comes first. And the beauty of bringing up the API and integration-led approach and the MuleSoft approach has been that we can put experience at the heart of it, and we can make sure that APIs are considered first in design as to how we bring this all together and really establish a much more community and collaborative approach across our different teams that are managing these different applications. But in an application, obviously, as we sort of get down to that level, each application will have its own complexity. And what I'm showing now is really just zooming in on one of those applications. And if you think about, sometimes you see star maps, they're just a patch of the night sky filled with different stars. But when you zoom out, it's really only a tiny piece of the universe you're looking at. And this is really just a tiny piece of one application that we have. And a tremendous amount of data and data tables that are sitting inside that application, the relationships each of those have. So when we've got all of that data to manage, all that data that we need to access, not just inside of that application, that data is a golden source of information that needs to be propagated across all the other applications that you saw in my previous slide. And really what we're wanting to do is simplify that. We cannot expose that level of complexity to a user. Certainly don't want it out in the community. And obviously we have to have security and other considerations as to how we manage that. So integration has become, again, a key focus because this just illustrates the point that there is far too much complexity just to try to take every one of those relationships that sit inside of an application and try to build relationships across other systems. It really will have some struggles. And I speak from experience because what we've had with our approach has been to also, we started with an integration approach that probably just did try to take existing relationships inside of an application and probably replicate those or bring them out and translate them into another system, most of the time for the purpose of reporting. And what I'm showing you here on the screen is our first integration approach, our initial integration approach as to how we might approach data collection. So data collection, I think there'd be plenty of you aware of data collection and census requirements are a key part of what we do, and how we want to keep that process simple for our sites to not bog down in the bureaucracy. of some of those processes. They really just need to focus on quality data entry. Now, really where we started, where we had the problem statement, we need to get that data out of a complex system, and we need to make it available in a reporting suite. Is that we then had numerous steps to basically get that data from one place to another. And although there's only 5 steps in this process, you'll see that there's a word commonly repeated, and it's not a word we really like to use when we talk transformation or digital, or we like to use when we talk integration, and that's the word manual. But as you can see here, manual existed in almost every step that we've had to date in our first early stage of integration. And a lot of the time, because of those manual processes, creating XMLs and trying to manage that through various steps, ultimately what happens as well is that you're sort of working backwards from a reporting outcome, and usually time is a bit short. So what will happen is that where there is an issue detected downstream, instead of going back to the source and fixing that issue, typically what would happen is the transformation of data would occur directly into the XML or somewhere else off system. So there was quite a lot of risk associated with a process like this, and there was quite a lot of challenge in the way that we then looked at this process to how we might scale it. How would we take something like this and try to build that full architecture that I showed earlier? And so we took that problem statement to our MuleSoft partners, and we really started to work with them on a full redesign and re-engineering of what it meant to have an API-led approach in our architecture. And really what we anchored to, and you would have seen this in previous parts of this presentation, is that we anchored back, like I spoke about earlier, we anchored back to that 3-tiered architecture, and we started to rebuild what we had in an automated way, removing those manual touch points to the greatest degree possible, but also ensuring that we had a focus on what is the system layer, what is the process layer, and ultimately what is the experience layer. We didn't try and do it all at once, and this is really where we are today. We have started to eat that elephant piece by piece. We've started to make sure that we can bring things together in a way that is easy enough for us to consume, given the journey we're on with our own capability. And also we've got numerous partners, numerous application providers and service providers that we need to bring on that journey as well. So we started by automating down to that system and building proper system APIs that worked. And yes, you'll see and notice that XML is still there. Because again, in that hybrid state that we're building, there are certain aspects of the way we work as a business that need to be facilitated. The goal being that we iteratively improve that over time as we keep pace with the aspiration and of our operational teams and how all of our stakeholders want to work. But what has really come together through this is that we've taken a lot of that transformation of data that sat off of systems in trying to derive insights and outcomes from numerous data points that have been sourced out of a complex system, and we've consolidated that and pulled that all right back into a single sort of student information API. So using that as a real anchor point as to how this all needs to come together, and simplifying the way in which we can manage all the complex rules and business logic that needs to fit inside of an integration approach like this one. And we've had a great deal of success that we're seeing already, as you can also see on there. The previous approach that we were having, even though it was still manual, we were looking at around 12 weeks per deployment. We've redesigned our deployment processes to shrink that right down to as little as 2 weeks for now. And we can bring our teams into a way of working that we never thought possible before. But it really does mean that we have to hook ourselves into this model, and we need to make sure that we're always putting that integration design and that 3-tiered architecture at the front of our processes. So where do we go from here? And this is where it gets exciting for us, because we really start to look at focuses we have of starting to now build that experience layer out, and we can build on what we had. So it's still that iterative building block approach, each of these being reusable, composable services and capabilities that we can put together for any changing need. And we start to really get the benefit out of that reusable architecture. And as a passion of mine, we start to be able to, for the first time, design through the experience layer and manage that down through process and system. So as you would have seen, at the moment we're coming up and out of that system layer and building up through to process, and then we'll build experience from there. But once we have those building blocks there, we shift and we start to say, well, look at all of our the community, our parents, students, teachers, corporate users, other agencies and providers. What experience do we want to create for them, starting with that design and making sure that we can build on that. And once we have that, we start to work our way through the experience APIs and sort of almost a working backwards approach as we start to then engineer the process APIs and the system APIs that we know we need. And it's really been a tremendous journey that we've seen come to life in a way with some expert advice from MuleSoft services, and really great partnership from a lot of our other providers that sit inside of our network. And really what we also will start to have through this is the ability to scale and implement and change that application network in a much more agile way. We can start working more in a more real-time basis, and we can start responding to needs as they emerge, rather than having to wait months and months for a project to be stood up and starting to meet those needs. And we start to get the most out of all of our applications. So, we're really excited about the destination we're on. Really confident that our ICT projects and the education management system program is really enabling our world-class vision. And we're really excited that a lot of our schools and a lot of the different teams that we have inside of our department are really able to get on this journey with us and start to talk integration and ask questions about integration, which we've never had before. So it really has brought it to the forefront, and we're really seeing the benefits. So in conclusion, I'd just like to hand back to Adam. So he'll finish up today's session and just talk to you a bit more about how to achieve a connected education experience.
Thank you, Sean, for that. That was really interesting, and we're really looking forward to seeing how your journey matures. And thank you all for coming to join us today. Before you go, though, please do come by the MuleSoft booth and come and have a chat with a Muley. We'd love to understand how we can help you with any of your integration or API challenges, and also how you might want to become certified. We're also joined here today at EduTech by Salesforce, who have some great education solutions. Thank you all.